I'm Christina McGleam, Deputy Commissioner at the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities.
I'm Lauren Huberman, Director of the Career Center for the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities.
We're really excited to bring everybody together to talk about disability-related topics and how it impacts Chicago residents with disabilities. This episode focuses on the intersectionality of people with disabilities and returning residents. So, Lauren, why do you think, why are we doing this? Why did we want to create a podcast?
Well, Christina, we wanted to create a podcast for a few reasons. I think one is it's just a really popular way for people to access information. People listen to podcasts all the time when they're walking, driving, traveling. I also think for that reason, it's easy for us to be able to share with other people's stories about people with disabilities in order to show commonality among all of us. And I think it allows for different voices to be considered for awareness and exposure to people and topics that you might not otherwise learn about in your regular life.
Yeah, as someone with a visual impairment, I love listening. That's definitely where I get my information or how I get my information. But we just want to make sure that we point out that this podcast also will be available in American Sign Language for those of you who would prefer follow that way or need to follow that way. Our first guest today is Ulysses Williams, who is a job seeker at the MOPD Career Center. He's an individual who identifies as having a visual impairment and has been working with one of our career placement counselors, Jeannie McGill, since last summer. Can you tell us a little bit about your disability and what brought you to the Career Center?
Yes, indeed. I suffer a rare eye disease called retinitis pigmentosa. It's a degenerative disease. It progresses. Eventually, I'll be totally blind. And how I found you guys was through DOORS, Department of Rehabilitation for the Blind and Visually Impaired.
What was it like when you came to the Career Center? Did you meet virtually first or over the phone?
I think I had an appointment the first time I met my career counselor, and the experience here at MOPD, the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities Career Center, it's wonderful. You guys have good energy. My counselor, she's just full of life, and helpful in many ways. And so I'm appreciative of Jeannie. And yeah, here I am. Because of you all, I'm employed. I'm working, which I'm proud of. My first job, might I add. So I'm thankful. I'm grateful.
Can you tell us a little bit about your job?
I'm a dishwasher at Whole Foods. And so my job is basically providing the cooked food in the cooked food section, prepared foods, dishes, clean dishes. Without the dishes being clean, there'll be no food prepared and ready for the customers.
How has the job been going for you, Ulysses?
It's been nice. Whole Foods as well. They have good energy, they're helpful, and they're willing to accommodate wherever I may need accommodations. And so, I'm grateful.
Was that something that you requested? Did you request reasonable accommodations for your job?
In the interview with the store manager, I didn't get a chance to, truthfully. He had already exposed the fact that they're willing to accommodate, and whatever I need as far as accommodations, just, don't be afraid to let them know. And so far, so good. I'm hands-on, so I'm good with my hands, and so that's something I know how to do naturally anyway, is bust some suds. So I don't need, very much accommodations for that. Now, if I take on other responsibilities in the store, I let them know, and I may need other accommodations, and they told me just let them know.
And we've heard such positive things about you in that role. And by the way, we did not get you that job. You were a huge part of getting that job.
Absolutely.
I like to think so.
You should. You should believe that.
Yeah.
Ulysses, where are you living currently?
Now I'm in a reentry center. It's a place that IDOC send you to. It's an award for good behavior, and it's supposed to be set up to help you with employment, where you can save money and or other programs and services such as schooling and things of that nature that would allow you to have a successful reentry back into society. And that's where I'm at now. I'm due to parole from that establishment in July 14th, 2023.
And so you'll have been there for a year, is that correct?
13 and a half months to be exact.
So you came from, where did you come?
From Dixon Correctional Facility.
And how long were you there?
9.5 years.
And while you were there, did you receive any accommodations?
Yes, I did. Although I had to fight for them, but schooling, I had to fight for that. They provided me with the cane. They provided me with talk and watch. I had to fight for the protective glasses because I am also photosensitive. Overall, I eventually got the accommodations I needed, and so here I am.
How did you learn those advocacy skills? How did you know that you had to fight, and how did you figure out how to do that?
Well, while incarcerated, I did have some good people around me, positive people, fellow residents in the facility. I wanted to, educate myself and learn specifically more about law. I reached out to some people such as Equip for Equality. They wound up taking a case of mine I filed, and that was about the education part, because they was not prepared for visually impaired persons at the facility. And so I was seeking to get my GED and further schooling afterwards, as well as learn Braille. And they just was like showing me off. And so I had to file a grievance and go through the grievance procedures. And then I reached out to Equip for Equality, and they took my case.
And then you got the accommodations that you needed? Then you were able to have access to those educational resources and tools?
Yes. Although they still didn't have certain auxiliary aids to assist me in the class. Grateful, I'm a fast learner, and I had another resident who they employed as sort of a tutor, and I kind of helped him teach me.
Okay, so there was an individual who helped to facilitate some of your learning, kind of served as a tutor.
Yes.
Yeah.
But you had to help them learn how to help you.
Yes. So everything I learned was really muscle memory, because we had the computer. They had what they call it's a new GED program, iPathways is what they call it. And so I would have to see the computer in order to operate and get the work done. But as you all know, I can't see the computer. And so he had to serve as sort of like my scribe.
Sure.
He wrote whatever notes I told him to write, and he did the labor on the computer. So he had to find a skillful way of teaching me when it comes to, let's say, for instance, mathematics, mathematical equations and things of that nature. He found a skillful way of helping me get the mental picture as to what he was trying to teach me, and it worked. It was helpful. Although I still didn't achieve my GED due to COVID. They shut everything down, and then shortly after, I was transferred to the reentry center, unfortunately.
Unfortunately that you didn't achieve your GED by then.
Yeah. But I intend to.
It was just still a barrier, though, because you weren't able to learn how to use the computer then, right? Because they didn't have the software you needed.
No. And that's what I mean by they didn't have all of the auxiliary aids, in the class that they were supposed to have to assist me.
But you're taking computer classes now, right?
Now, yeah.
Okay, that's great.
I'm totally, truth be told, computer illiterate, so I got to learn how to operate the keyboard, and then I can move forward to, being able to browse and search on the computer, taking it one step at a time.
Were there other barriers that you encountered while you were in prison, aside from the ones that we just discussed?
I mean, the auxiliary aid that I had and the ambulatory aid that they provided me, which was a person, like if I would go out on passes, he was the person who would assist me. I completed several programs and services that they had then at the facility, and I can't even count how many, but it was times where he may not have been available due to a visit or whatever he may have had personally going on in his case or whatever, that I would be without like help and support. And then, that kind of feel like it kind of puts you at a place, because coming from the man I'm used to being, which is independent, to lose my vision is like a humbling situation, to have to depend on a person to assist me in life. And that's kind of like a hard pill to swallow. So I had to ask for support and help in that area. And I got through it, but to say that it's fair, I don't think so.
And then once you're finished there, July 14th, is that what you said?
Yes.
So then the next step is that you'll be living independently.
Yes,
and will you
ma'am.
have any contact with anyone from the carceral system?
I don't intend to.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, they help get me into my own apartment. I heard some talks about them doing so, and so hopefully, that come to fruition. Because outside of them doing that, then I would be homeless.
Mm-hmm.
I will probably have to go to a shelter and start from ground zero.
Does it happen a lot? Is that common for people to have to go to a shelter?
No, because most people, either they have wives or they have women. They probably already had homes established before their incarceration, or some of them, they just choose to go home with family. Me in my position, I don't have that luxury. Truth be told, if I did, I wouldn't want to, because I'm my own man. Mm-hmm. And I need to stand on my own 2 feet and get where I need to be as a man. And I can't see myself as almost being 40-year-old man going to live with my mother.
Do you anticipate that will be a big adjustment for you, moving from the transition center into your own place?
Yes, I do. Prayerfully that it happen. I'm looking forward to it. It would be unfortunate for me to have to spend my monies that I make to have to rent me an apartment. But if so, then I must do what I must do. Mm-hmm. And I've witnessed them parole a guy out to his own apartment through their program. And so, he's not disabled. So I'm hoping that they'll be a little more accommodating in that area, and help me get into my own.
Ulysses, when you were at Dixon, did you meet a lot of other inmates who had disabilities?
Yes. Unfortunately, Dixon is more of a mental institution, although they have normal people, but also as well, that's the most as far as disability is mentally disturbed residents. I know a few of them personally, like myself, some that were totally blind and visually impaired. Some were in wheelchairs, some had no legs, some had limbs missing, arms,
Were those some of the same people that taught you how to advocate for yourself?
One guy, I met him. He's a visually impaired guy as well. And he one of the guys who helped teach me how to advocate for myself, specifically legally, as far as learning the law and Constitution. I give thanks to him, because if it wasn't for him, I probably wouldn't have, been as successful at gaining a lot of things that I should have had coming in the first place, advocating for myself and others like me.
I wanted to ask a little bit about when you got your release date. How did you feel when you got your release date from Dixon?
Honestly, it was unbelievable because I put in for it. And that's another thing, speaking to advocating for myself. I overqualified for the work release because they had been passed a law where they were allowing violent offenders to go to work release. And guys were going to work release left and right. And some guys that were going to work release, my disciplinary record far exceeded theirs. I've never been to SAG. I've never gotten in any trouble. I've completed just about every program and service that they had to provide. I was like a model prisoner. And so when I put in for the work release, they denied me and told me that I was properly placed. And so I reached out to Equip for Equality again. And so they pushed them to explain what did they mean by properly placed, because I was in the healthcare facility at the correctional center, because being there, do that exclude me from, having an equal opportunity at going to the reentry center like all other people. And so they wasn't willing to literally say what they meant by it. And so I had to threaten civil action again. And so they denied me in December of 2022. 4 months later, well, actually 6 months, because June 11 is when I got the surprise and they told me that, hey, you're being transferred. I'm like, where? They're like, you're going to ATC program. That's all Adult Transitional Center. That's just another word for reentry center, work release, and I was shocked. I guess they'd rather do the right thing than for me to take them back to court. And so
you didn't have to file again?
No. The settlement was them to do the right thing and allow me to go to the reentry center. So we didn't have to. We came to an agreement then. Well, they did, because I hadn't heard from my lawyer. I talked to her in April, and she told me she'll be getting back with me. And then I never heard from her. I just up and got a surprise saying I was being transferred.
Wow. Ulysses, what do you imagine for yourself in the next 1, 3, 5 years? Thinking about both short term and long term. What do you imagine, or what do you hope for yourself?
Well, short term, first and foremost, is to get some stability, meaning I need to have my own roof over my head. Long term, after that, saving monies, building my credit, such as what I'm working on now, and investing into real estate, which is one of the things that I have a passion for. And from there, invest in me some box trucks.
We're very happy for you and proud of you, and we celebrate your success. And we're really happy to have you here today. We think you're doing an amazing job, and we're here for you with each step.
Yeah, absolutely.
You just don't know how much that means to hear you say that. And it's a pleasure being here with you guys anytime.
Yeah, we've learned a lot from you and really proud of what you've gotten to accomplish so far. More to come.
Yep.
Yeah, well, blessings.
Our second guest today is Willette Benford. Miss Benford is the Director of Re-Entry for the City of Chicago Mayor's Office. Miss Benford is a champion for those formerly and currently incarcerated to receive fair treatment, and she works as a fierce advocate to ensure that progress and transformative change is being made. Director Benford, can you talk to us about your role at the City of Chicago?
I like to say that my role has three prongs. The interagency, the Mayor's Interagency Reentry Council. I oversee that. It's a bi-monthly meeting where we meet together with all city agencies and some sister agencies. And we meet around shaping goals for reentry, that piece. We also have the policy side and the programmatic side, but I'll stay with the interagency side for a minute. We had like 17 agencies that developed goals around reentry, and those goals were specifically geared to how these agencies could support returning residents. And that is something that we presented to the mayor for 2023 to ensure that reentry was at the top of the list. And also that agencies, some of the agencies, don't get me wrong, were doing really great work when I came on. And, just really building relationship with other city agencies to get on board with doing reentry work. And we began to meet around, I would say, July. And we met bi-monthly every 2 months after that. And the engagement and the way that city agencies and individuals that work with the city were engaged, it was phenomenal. And the goals have been amazing that they came up with. Also, the policy part, we have developed leading policy that is national leading. For instance, our fair chance hiring policy, which has a historic 5-year look-back period. Anyone convicted of a felony, anything older than 5 years won't be considered. There's many prongs to it. Also, there's an individualized assessment process. So even if you have been convicted within that time frame, you can still have an individualized assessment. And if what you've done has nothing to do with the job that you are performing, you can still be considered for that job. And finally, the programmatic side, which is programming through DFSS and the Spring Forward programming. We have community reentry support centers, just really those necessary resources from the top, the city agencies, all the way to the grassroots programming to make sure that individuals that are coming home from incarceration are set up for success.
Mm-hmm. Is your role the first of its kind for the city?
It is the first director of reentry for the city of Chicago. Yes.
How did you know Mayor Lightfoot?
She was my mayor.
Okay, whatever.
Wow.
I mean, had you ever worked
She was
with
my
her?
mayor, too.
No, I had never. See, you got to keep it a little light, too, Lord. Yeah, no, I had never worked with Mayor Lightfoot, but what I did work with Mayor Lightfoot on, and let me back up a bit. Yes, I did. We had the Returning Residents Working Group. She convened that because she wanted to know what were the challenges that returning residents were facing when they came home. That issue was very dear to her. She had a brother who served over 17 years inside. And so the issue was dear to her heart. And what happened was we convened the Returning Residents Working Group, which was made up of community leaders, policy individuals, government officials, and of course, those that were directly impacted. And what we did was we looked at the challenges, came up with recommendations, and then we presented it to the mayor. And in November of 2021, Mayor Lightfoot signed an executive order creating the Interagency Reentry Council and also allocating $13 million to reentry based off the recommendations from the Returning Residents Working Group. I was a part of that group.
What were you doing before?
I was organizing for Live Free Illinois, which is a faith-based organization. We organize churches, faith communities, community leaders, those directly impacted around gun violence and mass incarceration. And I was their lead decarceration organizer. And so we organized across the state, built out a chapter in Rockford, organizing churches in Rockford.
You mentioned that you were directly impacted. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, when I say directly impacted, normally people use the word formerly incarcerated. I use returning resident and directly impacted because I spent a significant amount of time inside. And I often say that I was criminalized for surviving. I was given another chance, a fair chance, when domestic violence was made a mitigating factor in sentencing. The law changed. And so one of the biggest law firms in the world, Kirkland and Ellis, took my case for free and pro bono and fought for me as if I paid them millions of dollars. And in 2019, February 6th, I walked out of Cook County Jail a free woman.
You were at Cook County Jail?
I came back to Cook County Jail after being remanded from IDOC to get the immediate release. But yes, I spent 4 months in Cook County Jail in 2019.
Oh my
From
gosh.
October to February 6th. And there were many things that I spoke about there, as well, because even in the women's division, there are times when women are treated in a way that is not gender sensitive, and I say that because I was next to a woman in a cell that clearly had mental health issues. And she was in a cell, and we talked to people about getting her some help. And I'm sure eventually she got some help. But at that point, she should never had to have come to jail to get mental health treatment. I'm huge on that. Mental health treatment, even after incarceration, a therapist, behavioral health therapy is really key to individual success. And I talked about being directly impacted, but I spent over 2 decades inside. Yeah, that is something that when I talk about it because individuals that have spent a significant amount of time inside does not make them inadequate or also does not make them ineligible to be able to do certain work. And so I think that it should be lifted up that even if you've done a significant amount of time, you still should be provided with the resources necessary to re-enter society and be a productive member of society.
And what are some of those resources?
Therapy, mental health services, also housing, affordable housing, also economic mobility, not just a job with a livable wage. People don't want to wake up bill insecure, rent insecure, food insecure, especially when you have children or even just for yourself, economic mobility, and those kind of things, family reunification, making sure that there are settings so that individuals, women with children, and also we have men, 50% of the men that are incarcerated are parents. And so reunification with their children, making sure that we provide those spaces so that individuals that have children can be set up for success. Because when you are supporting an individual, you're not just supporting them when they come home, you're supporting their family too. And this is a holistic approach would be something that would be beneficial not only to the individual, but to our city, because these same individuals will pump gas at the same gas station you pump at. We shop at the same stores. Our kids go to some of the same schools as your children. And all an individual wants is to be set up for success and provided with resources, not a handout, but a hand up.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that in the city that people are provided these resources, or do you think this is our vision and we're working toward it? Like, where do you think that we fall in the city of Chicago with being able to provide these resources?
I think in an answer to your question is 2-part. There are places where we have failed as a city to do that, but then there are also opportunities that we've taken recently to be able to provide things for individuals. For instance, like I said, the Spring Forward program, it is a great program. We're partnering, DFSS is partnering with IDOC and Cook County Jail. It is a 12-month rental subsidy with fair market rent where they are paying an individual's rent for 12 months. It's 400 individuals. A subset of those individuals will be granted housing for 12 months. There is workforce training for 24 months with a paid stipend, minimum wage paid stipend, but getting that training so that they can move into a job that pays well enough to be able to pay their rent. So that will be for 24 weeks, plus complete wraparound services so that they can get behavioral health, they can get transportation, everything that's needed in order to set them up for success. It is a pilot. And so with the pilot, there are 400 individuals, and then there will be 160 that will benefit from the rental subsidy. But as well as this goes, we can see how can we as a city and other agencies get on board to help expand that.
And economically, if someone just wants to look at the financial aspect of doing something like that program, economically, does it make sense? Is someone going to turn around and say, well, this program is just too expensive? You know, this is a blank $1 million program, so it's not sustainable for us to continue with all these supports.
Let's say this. It costs over $50,000, maybe even more, to keep an individual incarcerated. That is a salary.
For 1 year.
For 1 year.
Yeah.
That's a salary. And so let's just think about reallocating some of the money that we take to keep an individual incarcerated and put it into programming, resources, housing subsidies, and wraparound services. And then see, should we keep a person in a cage or should we bring them home and provide resources so that they can provide for their families? There's a saying that says, if I give you a fish sandwich, you eat for a day. But if I teach you how to fish, you eat for a lifetime. And so in teaching an individual how to provide for themselves and their families, I think it would be beneficial for us all.
Can you talk to us a little bit about the work you're doing at the city level?
Absolutely. I touched on the fair chance hiring piece because it gives an individual an opportunity to provide for their families, but also even with a record. The city always hired people with records, but individuals didn't know it. And so now what this does is give a more transparent process, but also it has a cutoff time of when or how far back you can look in a person's past. If it's 5 years or older and has nothing to do with the grant funding or some of the funding that is going into that, then it's off limits. And that is huge because 5 years look back period for a city job with benefits, insurance, and things like that, that is huge for a person that is a returning resident. And then a 7-year look back period for mayor office positions. Yes, that was cutting edge. It was leading. It was, it was like, let's do it. And so the ordinance passed on February 16th. The mayor signed it and it went into effect immediately. Also, there is equitable language on the city's website that specifically says we hire returning residents or individuals with convictions. And that is right there where it's 2,500 jobs annually on the city's website. Right there, it says that we hire individuals with prior convictions. So that too was huge. Another thing we'll be doing is we will have a microsite that will go live on April 10th. It is a microsite that is all things reentry. It'll have some of the resources about reentry. It'll talk about jobs and workforce training. Also, lately, we've heard a lot around the registries. And so working to make sure that that process is streamlined so that individuals can get registered and not get violated. And so making sure that that information is up there. Also, a Know Your Rights piece will be on there. And then the city has just built out the 211 site. And so there will be a link to the 211 site, but there's also a link for reentry on the 211 site. So it's good work. And I'm just hoping that it'll continue because we need it to continue.
Director Benford, you're such a strong advocate. How did you start to learn these advocacy skills? And when did you learn to be able to advocate for yourself and others?
I learned inside, Lauren. I had to advocate for myself and others inside. There were many things that were done to women that was very dehumanizing in prison. If I mentioned some of the things, it would just probably horrify you. However, I knew the strength of a pen, and so I began to write. And I would write and write and write until the wrongs were made right. And so that was something that has always been in my heart, to see an injustice and say that is wrong, and not just talk about it, but what can I do to change it? And I'll tell you an incident that happened. Inside, I wasn't always a good girl, as they say. And so I went to SEG for something.
Tell us what SAG is.
SEG is when they segregate you from general population for an infraction of one of the rules. And so I was in segregation, and I had a roommate who had a mental illness. And every time she encountered the correctional officers, there would be an altercation. And she came in with just a couple of years, and they had tacked on time and time and time. And so what I did was I wrote a letter to the Prisoner Review Board for her. And they heard it because they kept giving her time, but they didn't take care of her and give her the meds and things that she needed. I'm sorry, that kind of, yeah. But she eventually got that. And when she went home, she wrote me. And she thanked me for writing that letter for her, because they got rid of all the extra time. She went to see them, and they took it off, and she was able to go home. But she had years tacked on just because she wasn't treated for her mental illness. Things like that. You know, I've had to write grievances about jobs that were only given to white women. You know, they didn't give them to Black girls. And I wrote a 6-page grievance on racism and discrimination. I didn't get the job because they gave me a minor ticket, but they began to hire women of color at a rapid pace. And some of them are home today because they were able to get days because they could get that job. But things like that, having to advocate on the inside and then coming out and being denied housing, that catapulted me into the work here.
Incredible. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is amazing about that woman, and that she got out and that she thanked you. And are you in touch with her now at all?
No, I'm not. No. But there were many women that I mentored and, you know, supported while they were inside that I am in contact with and that wrote me. And because, you know, I am a believer, you know, I taught Bible study for 13 years while I was inside, and just really my faith has carried me a lot of places. And it has helped me support others when they were in difficult situations, because even with the amount of time that I had, I knew that we still had a reason to live and that the law could change any day and you could go home. So when an 18-year-old sits on my bed and says, I'm thinking about killing myself, inside, then you have to think about how do you support her in knowing that she has a lot to live for in a cage.
Mm-hmm. What kinds of things do you think people have to live for on the inside?
Their children, their families, knowing that we live in a carceral system that could change overnight. A law could change overnight and you could go home tomorrow, because there are advocates on the outside in this space fighting every day to change policy and to change laws so that you could come home to your family, because we know that there are sentencing disparities when it comes to certain populations.
When you were inside, did you meet a lot of people with disabilities?
Oh, I remember meeting a young lady in the 90s. She was blind. And it wasn't where they had the program with assisting people with disabilities at the time. So, she would have to get somebody on the unit to walk her to what we call the chow hall, which is where you go to eat. And, any place she needed to go, she had to have someone assist her. She had to have someone be her eyes for her. And so I remember when they began to put the little braille things up by the bathroom and different areas like the visiting room and, places like that. But also I remember when they implemented that you could apply for the job to be a person with disabilities assistant. And it became a full-time assignment. I remember when they built ramps for people with wheelchairs and limited movement, that people were able to get up to their housing unit without so much of a struggle.
Director Benford, it seems like you could work in so many areas related to the carceral system. Like you could work around getting more reforms on the inside. How did you decide that you wanted your energy to be around returning residents?
As I said, Lauren, I didn't plan to work in this field. It was by chance, because when I was denied housing, I actually went through a transitional house, Grace House, and they offered all kinds of services. But when it came to housing, I was denied based off a 26-year-old conviction. 26 years. And so when that happened, we had just passed the Just Housing Amendment ordinance in Cook County. I was part of a coalition that helped pass that to make it illegal to deny someone housing based off their background alone. And so I began to advocate for myself. I told them, I said, it's illegal for you to deny me housing based off my background. And so for a week and a half, we went through this through an email, and people that were part of the coalition were preparing for the fight. And so a week and a half later, Ms. Benford, we apologized. We were wrong. Actually, their policy has changed, because that let me know that if they did it to me, how many women before me had they denied based simply off of a 20-year-old conviction. And that catapulted me into the work. Let's say this. If an individual could be supported with the finance that you spend to keep them incarcerated for, let's say, 10 years, and you pay to keep them incarcerated, you don't provide any resources, and when they come back home, and they have nothing, and they have no resources, and they have no education, you say that they are a threat to society. The threat was that when society had the opportunity to support this individual in reentry, it failed. Because you can no more throw someone in a cage and treat them inhumane year after year after year after year, and then when they come home, do absolutely nothing for them, and then expect them to return to society as a productive member, quote, of society. It's inhumane. It's inhumane for our elected officials, anyone in government that says that an investment in people is not a great investment. That is wrong, because Of course, the carceral system is the punishment. But when an individual comes home and there are lifetime barriers to reentry, then what are we doing? Are we relegating people to a second-class state, which was intentional? I know it was. I'm answering my own question. But at some point, we got to say, look, we got to support people. They are tax-paying citizens. They have families. They've served their time. And how do we set them up for success so that they can be productive in our community?
Thinking about individuals who are currently incarcerated or were formerly incarcerated, I was just doing some research before our session with you and was reading that about 66% of incarcerated people self-reported a disability, with Black, Hispanic, and multiracial disabled men especially being overrepresented in prisons. And is this surprising to you at all, that percentage?
Not at all. Not at all. And let me say this, even with disabilities, there's a wide range of disabilities. Being dyslexic is a disability. And so it doesn't mean that you're not smart. It means you learn differently. And so to be penalized for that, it's like, okay, so now we're going to make you pay for the way that you were born, and you cannot have this job or this because you're dyslexic. That makes no sense.
Yeah, and of that statistic, of the 66% from the study that were self-reported, they broke it down into 40% who reported having a psychiatric type of diagnosis or disability, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, depressive disorder, PTSD, and then 56% were non-psychiatric. These are their words. And the highest being a cognitive disability, ADHD, and then another category was anyone who reported previously being in quote unquote special ed classes in school.
Absolutely. And here's the thing. When we talk about disabilities or we talk about trauma, unaddressed trauma produces mental illness or it exacerbates it, because when trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma that is unaddressed, there is going to be a break sooner or later, a mental break. Because how do I process all of these things that have happened to me without the support that I need? I'm not getting it. You know, and I thank Mayor Lightfoot for the 77 communities that have TICCs in them, because that is a trauma-informed center of care. See, you know, we use acronyms at the city all the time, and then we have to think about what they mean when people put you on the spot.
Sorry about that.
But yeah, it's a trauma-informed center of care. CDPH has done a great job with making sure that all 77 communities in the city of Chicago will have a trauma-informed center of care where, regardless of your insurance or your income, you can access mental health services.
And some of those are in the libraries too,
yes,
right?
Yes, they are currently starting a pilot in the libraries because people sometimes with mental health issues gravitate towards the quiet place, which is the library.
And I know a lot of, like Lauren said, a lot of people come into the carceral system with a disability. But do you feel that a lot of people leave with one, even if they didn't have one when they came in?
Absolutely. There is a different type of trauma associated with being incarcerated. Earlier, there was a panel that First Lady M.K. Pritzker spoke about when she first came on, how there were 90% of men guarding women in female facilities. So you can I'm going to let you sit with that for a minute. 90% of the guards were men. And so now it has flipped. 90% are women in women facilities. And also in District 1, the parolees have gender sensitive parole officers, and all women are over that district for parolees in District 1. Chief Garnett said that they were trying to implement it in other areas, but they have accomplished it in District 1.
Do you think in your work, especially with the city in your work, it seems like the council, the Reentry Council, has been such a positive and strong force? Have you encountered resistance, or has it mostly been people behind you helping to push and make changes?
I'll say this. 1 in 2 individuals either have someone in their family that's incarcerated, or they know someone that's incarcerated, or has a prior conviction. And so with that, there was so much momentum pushing forward. Of course, there will always be resistance, but there were more pushing forward for change than there was resistance. And that's how we were able to move certain things. But many people know someone who has been formerly incarcerated or have a prior conviction, whether it is a family member, a neighbor, themselves, and unable to re-enter with dignity. You know, I think that once you can put a face to re-entry, someone that has been formerly incarcerated or is a returning resident and they have dignity, I've served my time, and so you will not make me ashamed or make me feel less than because I have a conviction in my past. And so that is something that I believe really supported me in my role. I came into my role knowing who I was as a human being. I didn't need to explain that, but also knowing that there were people that I was working with that had individuals that were currently incarcerated, formerly incarcerated, or had a prior conviction. And so with that, being able to just lift up people humanely in that space made it really easy to work with the people in that council. And my hope is that we can continue our work, move it forward, not with just goals, but budgets for the city agencies that are doing reentry work, that they could have monies set aside to really support those that are returning residents that encounter their agencies.
Yeah, I mean, I just think about all the things we say about people with disabilities, and as someone with the disability, and how that does, all those traits or skills really do tie in together with, being a excellent problem solver. It sounds like that's what you did for years. And I see that in a lot of our clients too.
Well, thank you, Christina. I'd like to solve many more problems, but we'll see.
Well, I sure hope you get to. Thanks for listening. Be sure to follow us on social media at MOPD Chicago. I'm your co-host, Christina McLean.
I'm your co-host, Lauren Huberman. Special thanks to our editing and recording engineer, Rob Litwin, our executive producer, Commissioner Rachel Arfa, and thank you to the staff at the Harold Washington Library.